Releasing November 4th, 2025, Europa Universalis 5, or EU5, is a grand strategy game and continuation of a series whose last entry, EU4, released way back in 2013, a game which received numerous DLC and widespread acclaim from fans and critics alike. Paradox was kind enough to offer me an advanced copy of EU5 to make a video, only there's one problem. I've never played EU4, not even a little bit. And so I pondered what sort of video I could possibly make on a game whose mechanics are completely alien to me. I couldn't possibly make a review, that would be disingenuous, but that's when it hit me. I've given myself 10 hours with EU5, which as anyone who's ever played a grand strategy game knows, hardly scratches the surface, but I did this mainly to determine if this is really a game a total beginner like me, perhaps many watching this video, purely with the in-game tooltips and tutorials could enjoy. Of course, there will be numerous player-made guides, tutorials, and otherwise in the coming weeks here on YouTube and otherwise, but for those of you who want to know if it's possible to jump into EU5 and try the game out for yourself, enjoy it with what is already there right now, this video is for you. And so to start off, I want to say that when you load the game for the first time, first of all, you're going to be greeted by this lovely music, which you'll be hearing in the background throughout this video. I was very, very impressed with the soundtrack while playing this game. I loved it. And when you hit new game for the first time, you can play as either a kingdom of your own choosing or one of the recommended ones. And these are broken down by economic, political, or expansion desires. And these are basically what these kingdoms have in mind, like what their goal could be for you during your playthrough, and the tutorial will sort of frame itself around that. When you load up one of these countries for the first time, you're going to get a pretty expansive tutorial, and I found this to be extremely useful. There are a bunch of mechanics to this game. There's a really great, I would say it's about 30-40 minutes depending on how fast you read and depending how much time you want to go through each little subtext, but going through all of this UI, I thought it was very well written, very well explained. It kind of holds your hand a bit, especially at the beginning, to show you where everything is. It highlights things very well. I was overall very impressed by the tutorial. I thought that it was very useful. It just kind of gives you enough on the surface to at least know what you're looking at on screen, because there's just so much that you have to cover and explore that it can be really overwhelming. So it's definitely appreciated that Paradox took the time to make a tutorial that actually, makes some sense, because I wasn't imploding within 2 seconds of starting the game, which is nice. Once you get through this tutorial section, there's basically these tasks that you can do. There's political, economic, and military tasks, basically like expansion. And these will all give you a variety of goals or things to achieve, basically as a means to not only teach the player how to do these things for future gameplay, for future playthroughs where you're not going to be having these little tooltips, but also just to, I guess, give you a goal, something to work towards. I think especially for newer players who maybe don't know what they should be doing, having a goal-oriented task is really, really useful. I know it is for me. It helped me a lot when I was learning to play CK3, for example, because you'd have, a decision or something that you'd want to do, and it would say, oh, you need all of these things to achieve this decision. And you're like, okay, well, that's what I have to do. It's the exact same way with this. It'll be like, okay, you want to expand your territory. You need to figure out how to go to war. You need to figure out how to get a casus belli. You need to figure out how to do that without losing integrity, a bunch of different things, and it's really, really useful. And I was very, very impressed by this. And I actually did, over my 10 hours, play as 2 different kingdoms to try 2 different versions of this. I did do all 3 tasks, or tried all 3 tasks with all these kingdoms. The only one I didn't play kingdom-wise was a political kingdom. I played as an economic one, Hungary, and I played as a military one, which is Castile. I started with Castile. I definitely made a lot more mistakes that time around, and as you would in any grand strategy game, it's kind of hard to figure out what you should and shouldn't be doing because you're sort of just going around and figuring things out as you go. I will say I really love how many historical events happen in EU5. There's a lot more historical context, and there's also things that will pop up that sort of explain what these situations are, like what's the Renaissance, the professional army begin in Europe, where did it begin, what is the context of that? The bubonic plague happens while you're playing. Where did that come from? What is that? It explains all of these things if you didn't know, and I think that it's going to be really helpful for somebody maybe who's not that acclimated with history, so that you can kind of understand these things, like what is the 100 Years' War, what is the expansion of the Turks. It was really, really cool, and I like that the game will tell you how many historical events each kingdom has, so that you know basically things that are going to pop up throughout your playthrough. Like some have maybe like 50, where some will have like a couple hundred. It's very cool. Castile had quite a few, and I really enjoyed the variety of them. I enjoyed kind of trying to figure out how to play as a military kingdom. I will say I really like the military system in EU5. I like it a lot more, that you have to raise your levies from their individual counties, and also you can train a more professional army, but it does cost manpower. It's more robust, but I think that the military combat system reminded me a lot of CK3, like the actual mechanics and execution of it. And I think it's really great. I think that it's fun that you can embargo stuff. I mean, you don't need me to explain this because that's not really going to help you with determining the title of this video. But just as an aside, I think that the war system was really fun. And as a first time, totally new player, after about 5 hours with Castile, I managed to take over Granada and make them into a vassal. And I also managed to form Galicia in the northwestern corner as another kingdom. So 2 vassals, so I wouldn't have to be in charge of, like integrating them into my province and stuff, which I think is pretty good for somebody who's never played this before. I didn't get completely wrecked or ruin my day. So I would take that as a win. I did spread myself a little too thin too quickly, I think, and I didn't have enough of an economy to sort of foster a continued expansion. But I think if I tried it again, I would do a little bit better, which I think is good. And the fact that I even am willing to consider trying more, I think is a really positive indicator. I had a lot of fun with this one, but I had more fun, honestly, as Hungary, because Hungary allows you to do a lot of political and economic tasks, which is kind of what I did. I intermixed the 2 of them there and just sort of building up this fairly rural kingdom into something like an economic powerhouse and also a diplomatic powerhouse. I ended up allying myself with some pretty strong kingdoms like Bohemia, who ended up being, I think, the 2nd power by the time I reached my 10-hour limit, because I was very strict about this. I did not want to go over 10 hours, even though I do want to play more, which I think is to this game's credit. I found that the mixing of these play styles is really great. You can obviously mix and match, and you can do a little bit of expansion or a little bit of war, even as an economic kingdom, which is probably encouraged because you will need to defend yourself from time to time or participate in wars with your allies that you happen to make. But overall, I had a really fun time in my 10 hours, and I think having fun is the big key for something like this, because if you have no context otherwise and you have no idea what's going on, being able to look at all of this going on the map and all of these menus and systems and stuff and still say I'm having a good time, I think is a really big positive, especially if you have no idea what's happening. And so I want to reach the topic of this video because there's no reason this video should be like 30 minutes long. I can come to my conclusion here within the last minute or 2. Is EU5 a beginner-friendly game? And the answer is yes and no. Yes, because I think that if you have some familiarity with strategy games, like myself, it won't be that bad. Even though I don't play a lot of grand strategy games and I have never played EU4, I'm still fairly familiar. I used to play RTSs pretty much religiously as a kid, and I have played the occasional Civ game. I've played a lot of different strategy type games, even if they're not grand strategy games, so I do have a general idea about what these systems are. And I've also played Victoria 3 a little bit, so the trade stuff wasn't that weird to me. But I do want to mention there's a lot of great automation features too for newer players, so if you don't know how to do buildings or manage your resources very well, you can automate those at the start and then slowly get acclimated to those. It even recommends you automate trade because it knows that it's complicated, which I think is really fantastic. Being able to automate pretty much everything and just sort of see how things work will be really beneficial to a lot of new players. It was to me. And by the time I played as Hungary, I was able to manage a lot of those on my own, but I was able to play a few hours with Castile and kind of figure things out before I took off some of those handrails. And there's still more. There is no parameter where 10 hours is enough time to play this game, but I have a better understanding than I did 10 hours ago, obviously, and I think that that's to its credit, because you could easily play another strategy game for 10 hours and still have absolutely no idea of what you're doing. I will say, though, I also think that it's not beginner-friendly, because if you've never played a strategy game, I don't know why you'd be watching this video, but if you haven't, it's going to be a harder time. I do think that the tooltips are really useful. I do think that it explains a lot of stuff really well, but there's a lot going on, and it can still feel really overwhelming to look at what kind of feels like a graphical Excel spreadsheet, not as much as Victoria 3, of course, but it still has that feeling. There's a massive menu at the top. There's a ton of different map modes. There's a ton of stuff on the right side of the screen. There's a lot of things that are going on, not to mention all of the different kingdoms and stuff building things around you or doing whatever they happen to be doing. It can be really overwhelming, and I know for a lot of new players, even to something like Crusader Kings 3, which is very beginner friendly, it can be a lot. And so I do want to stress that while I do think the game, for people who have a little strategic experience, is going to be pretty easy to get into, I think people who have absolutely none, which probably goes without saying, but I do want to mention it, it is going to be a little more difficult. But that's going to be it for me. That's pretty much the gist of this video. I played for 10 hours. There's not a ton I can say otherwise. I really enjoyed my time with it. I think the game looks fantastic. It plays really fun. I'm excited to jump in and play a little bit more. I think personally, though, I'm going to wait till some of those tutorials come out, probably in a month or so. Let some of the bugs and stuff get out of it, because there were some bugs and some things that I noticed and some performance issues. But once those are patched out, once those videos are out and I can kind of dive into those and watch those, I'm really looking forward to giving them a try. But for this video, I didn't want to ask any questions. I didn't want anybody to tell me anything. I just wanted to come in here and see if I could figure it out myself. And I think I did pretty well. So if you're looking to pick this up on release and you've never played EU4, I would say that you can absolutely play this and still have a good time. And I think that that's what you want out of a strategy game. This is going to be a really rich, deep experience. I'm very much looking forward to exploring this more, and you may see more of this on the channel because I know there's some great mods coming to it as well that I would love to try out finally. But that's going to be for me. As always, thank you to Paradox for sponsoring this video. I put it at the beginning this time, and I'm going to say it at the end again. But really, really appreciate you guys giving me access to EU5, even if I've never played the other one. It was a lot of fun, and I will happily see you all in the next one. Enjoy EU5.